Hi loves, my name is Paige, this is Pages with Paige, and today we're going to be talking through my mid-year stats. Hello, so welcome to the third video in my mid-year wrap-up installment things. I will leave a link down below to my mid-year freakout tag as well as my goals check-in. These are just going over various components of my reading life in the past 6 months. Today we are focusing on the stats. I have Ali from Hardback Hoarder's previous rendition of their book tracker, which I have amended to suit my needs, and then added extra things here and there with the help of Erin from Cheaper and Shelves, because they're amazing with spreadsheets and just to understand my brain so much better than myself. I'm going to talk through most of the stats for where we're at for this year, but I'm also going to mention a couple of interesting ones from 2022. Looking at where I was at this time last year is really fascinating to me, and I would like to talk through it, but I don't want it to be this is what this was what that was. I just feel like that's a little bit overwhelming considering how many numbers and stats I'm going to be throwing at you anyway. I'm just going to go over the things that I find interesting and talk about the comparisons as I sort of see fit. If there is anything you would like me to do a comparison for, more than happy to. I am pulling the data from my book tracker, and then I will also talk through some of the story graph stats as well, just because we're here and we can. So my books read are 86, which I'm really happy with, and my pages read is 28,615, which equates to about 233 hours listened. I do accommodate for the audiobook being at the speed that I read it at. So I'd hate to see the actual stats of hours of the audiobook, but this is the hours that I've spent actively listening to audiobooks. I've had 2 rereads, and the books that I have acquired were 37, which I'm super happy with and talk about more in my goals. So I want to pull the comparison here. My totals for 2022 blew my mind when I realized. So I took out the second half of the year for my spreadsheet, so I just had January through to June. I'd read 105 books at this point. 105. I'd read 34 for January, which was predominantly Animorphs, and then they continued to be sprinkled out. And then my next biggest month was April with 21. I definitely read a fuck ton more shit, but the consistency wasn't there, and my pages read was 28,634. I've read 19 less pages with 20 less books. What the fuck? That is nuts to me. I know that this is skewed by Animorphs completely and wholeheartedly, but that blows my mind that it had such a big impact on what I could have been reading instead. I haven't read more than last year. I've just read bigger, and I am thrilled. That is what I wanted to be focusing on. I am so unbelievably happy with that fact. And then to pull another comparison, I've done the same amount of rereads, which I find very entertaining. I reread 2 in 2022 and I've reread 2 in 2023. So cool. I didn't think I was that big of a rereader. I know I've got my annual Matilda and I have reread a couple here and there for different purposes, but it's just funny that that's exactly how it was. And then the books that I had acquired was 78. I've halved the amount of books that came into my shelves during the same period, which blows my fucking mind. February, I hit a slump. I only read 9 books, and that equated to 2,794 pages, which I'm fine with. Slumps happen. Ash and I were in Sydney for a lot of it, and I was having a grand old time. I didn't expect to read a lot, and I read a day, a full night physically with no audiobook, which took a lot of brain power. My highest reading month was May, with 5,801 pages read. But I've consistently hit that 5 for April, May, and June because of the buddy reads that I've got going and how I've just set up my TBR, and I'm like, holy shit, this needs to stop soon, please. Cannot keep going like this. In terms of my formats, I'm still 2 ebook, 3 audiobook, and then 13 physicals, then the mixes with 50 physical audio, which equates to 58% of my reading being via immersion reading, which is different from last year because I was listening to the audiobooks of the Animorphs, or for a particular point I got up to, there was no audiobook available. They've been releasing them throughout, which is why I then staggered it for the remainder this year. So I'd read 22 audiobooks and 20 ebooks, which is nuts. I knew it skewed my stats, so it was still 43.8% of my reading was physical audio in 2022, but that's it's just nuts. Then for age range, I've had one children's, which was a Final Fantasy book, 24 middle grade, 24 young adult, 1 new adult, and 36 adult. So leaning more towards adult, which has been a continuing trend, except for the fact that I read Animorphs. So that was 40 middle grades last year. Adults still being a larger chunk, and I'm still reading around a quarter YA, give or take. In terms of books where I read them from, this year I'm thrilled that 60 are from my own shelves. 23 are from my library, and that includes the Libby app, and like Hoopla and all of that are all clumped together. 2 were from NetGalley, and then 1 was other. So 70% of my reading has come from my own books this year, whereas with Animorphs skewing the data once again, I did have 50 owned books off my shelf this time last year. That's pretty cool. That only equated to 48%, with my library coming in at 35% and then other being 12%, which was majority Animorphs. In terms of listen via, I find this very interesting. I wasn't expecting this shift. So my highest still is Libby at 29, which is 40%. 41% of my reading, but then we had other, which was the Animorphs through the Hoopla app, which is still a library-based app, so I'm fine with that. Then we had 11 from Audible, 9 from BorrowBox, still a library app, and 3 from Script. So I feel like there have been more Audible exclusive editions, or I just needed to get through it faster and I can listen to them on 3.5 in Audible, whereas it caps at 3 for the other apps. So I've been leaning a little bit more back into Audible than I would like, and I am thinking of deactivating, if I haven't already. I can't quite remember if I've deactivated my Scrib account. I've only read 3 books from there, so I can find them at other locations. I'll leave a link to Crystal's video down below where she talked about cancelling Scribd, because she went through and found every book on her own shelf, a different library app, or if it was an Audible exclusive, or if it didn't have an audiobook, and basically categorized her books by where she can source the audiobooks. And I thought I couldn't do that for nearly 400 books. So I am in awe, so please go check it out. But the fact that she's done this really cemented to her where she was reading from and or able to find them, and if it was worthwhile still keeping her subscription. Then I finally set it up and it's glorious. So my series stats, I had it as part of a series or a standalone. That was it. That was all that it was broken down into, and we have amended it. So now it hits my things of whether I've started it, whether I started and have decided to DNF, because I think that's important to note. If I've DNF'd it partway through a book that I was reading or decided not to continue on with after. Companion novel, which I rarely ever use. Standalones, if it's just a continuation, if I'm now caught up. This one fluctuates so fucking much, so I'll have caught up, but then it won't be accurate because the next book will come out in that year, and then I'm no longer caught up. I understand that it's fluctuating, and I'm fine to just make amendments as I see fit. And then if it's the final book and I've finished the series. I was so shocked at this start. I didn't realize 24 of the books I've read this year are standalones. I was like, yeah, like I spent a whole month reading series. 28% of my reading, more than a quarter, has been standalones. And I'm like, where the fuck has this come from? I realize it's my book haul revisited and a few other bits and pieces just floating around, but most of my book haul revisited are standalones, or they're not the second or third books in series. So I was like, right, that makes sense. But then we have 5 series that I've started, 2 that I've then started and decided to DNF this year, 42 books that are continuations in series. I have read so many fucking continuations. 19 of those were Animorphs, so the rest were just the next book in a series. I have made so much fucking progress, and yet it doesn't show because I don't finish them. I just continue. So 23 books. It's fine, I'm fine. It's all good. 49% of my reading. So nearly half is continuing on. And to be fair, I have 6 books that caught me up. One of those is now, the next book is already out and I own it, and I'm hoping to get to it soon. And 7 of those I have finished. So more than 64% of my reading has been continuing or finishing series. So 64%, yeah, I'm feeling happy with that. It definitely took me by surprise. I didn't think I'd had so many standalones when I first saw this. Then when comparing it to 2022, I had read 23% standalones. So I've read, percentage-wise, more standalones than I had in 2022. But I also had 18.1% of my reads be the first books in series, and none of those I decided to DNF at that point. I I had 60 continuations, 30 of which were Animorphs, so 30 next books in series, and I only finished one series. I feel better about my stats. I was surprised by the standalone amount. I didn't realize it was that high. Then the next stat is my page range, and my goal essentially is I want to have the larger majority of my reading be 300 pages or more, just because that's where I'd like it to be. I had 3 books that were under 100 pages. I've had 22, 19 of those being Animorphs in the hundreds range. I had 11 in the 200s range, 23 in the 300 range, and 13 400s range, 8 in the 500s, 3 in the 600s, 2 in the 700s, and 1 in the 800s. So feeling really good about that, because 41% of my reading is 300 pages or less. So we're reading majority the 300s. Room for improvement, but I also did have 19 Animorphs to contribute to those 100 pages. So now that there's no more, hopefully I will read some chunkier shit. But 14 out of 86 books were over 500 pages, because my large range is the 300s to 400s. So the fact that 14 out of 86 were my big books, I'm really, really proud of that fact. In comparison, for this time last year, 61% of my reading was 200 pages or less, and 3%, so 8 books out of the 101 books that I had read was over 500 pages. I did have a 1,000-page book in there, 4 500s, 3 600s, and 1,000. So there was chunks in there, and I know I read a few 1,000-page books last year, and I think it was more in the later half of the year, but I'm still super proud of the improvement that I've made. So it is now 16% of my reading rather than 3%, and I've added 6 more books already that have been over that 500-page mark. So super proud of that. Next, we have star ratings, and I am feeling really conflicted about where these lie. My predominant, thank God, is still over 4 stars, but I've gotten a lot more critical with my reading this year, and I can tell in my ratings. So top to bottom, I've had 15 5 stars, 19 4.5s, 28 4 stars, 12 3.5, and 12 3 stars. My 5 stars is, holy shit, this was beautiful. I feel like it's part of my personality. I want to recommend this to everyone. Not everyone's gonna vibe with it, but this hits every vibe that I need. This is shit that I just, yes please. My 4.5s are, this was fucking great. I had so much fun with it. It was almost a 5-star, but it just didn't quite have that spark that I just know in a 5-star book, which I'm not feeling that spark as much. So there have been less 5 stars than years previously, and so my overall average rating is a 4.07, which I'm happy it's over 4. But in comparison to 2022, my average rating was a 4.25. I know I was reading a lot of Animorphs, but I also felt like I was reading a lot of good stuff. So in comparison, I had a quarter of my rating was 5 stars, whereas for this year it's 17%. So it hasn't dropped drastically, but there has been a shift. 21% and 22% for 4.5s, so that's pretty much on par. My 4 stars was 39% last year, where it was 33 this year. My 3.5s are now 14% rather than 12%. I had 2 3 stars and 1 1.5 star for last year, whereas I haven't had any that obscene, but I have had 12 3 stars instead of 2. So I can just see that I'm becoming a more critical reader. It doesn't worry me. I want to be picking up the things that I enjoy, and I feel like if a book is okay, that is my 3 stars. So I wanted to tell you my rating scale so you can get a vibe for when I'm talking about it in my wrap-ups. It infuriates Ash to no extent that I use half stars, but I also only use a 5-star scale in the fact that it's a 3, 3.5, so on and so forth. Then in terms of genre reads, my sci-fi and fantasy are neck and neck, with fantasy being 29 and sci-fi 23, so at least my fantasy has finally exceeded my sci-fi, which for last year, fantasy was 31 and my sci-fi was 40. So that's nuts. It was very interesting seeing the fact that my fantasy has finally overtaken my sci-fi, and very surprised. I have read no anthologies this year, which I'd like to find more of, but also series, so we won't focus on that. I've read 4 classics, whereas this time last year I hadn't read any. Non-fiction, I read 3 this year, only 2 last year, absolutely fine. I haven't read any thrillers, whereas I'd read 3 last year, which is very surprising. Romance is on par. Paranormal is significantly less because I didn't binge read the Blue Blood series and wasn't reading the Mortal Instruments as well. So that's where they're at. My historical is up. I read 1 last year and have 5 this year. That would be a few different things actually. And then graphic novels, I didn't read any this time last year and I've read 2 this year. In terms of author stats, this remains pretty consistent, even with reading continuations and series. 77% were read before and 23% are new to me for this year. I'm not going to go into publication years just because it infuriates the shit out of me trying to get my publication year graph to look nice, so apologies. In terms of books, I've acquired 37, 10 of which I've read, 27 that aren't. I've bought 13 myself, 1 of which I've read and 12 of which I've not. Shit, that's bad. In terms of gifted, I've read 8 and haven't read 14. Got a little bit of work to do. I've spent $198.15 on books in the past 6 months, which I'm super proud of. Oh, and 7 of those are going on to Ash's TBR. The other 30 are going on to my shelves. The only other thing that I'm really disappointed in myself with is the representation in it. I know that I'm reading through my older series that I've started before, becoming knowledgeable on reading diversely, and a lot of these are cis and white, which is frustrating because I want to be reading diverse and queer and fun and BIPOC. Have made this choice, and so I am seeing it through so then I can enjoy those diverse reads once I've cleared these previous outstanding series. But I have been acquiring the next books in those series if I didn't already own them. So my representation is 41%. So that's any form of representation, whether that be LGBT, disability, BIPOC, any of that. I'm sad it's under 50%. It should be more than 50, but I'm devastated that it's only 41%. I'm not going to beat myself up about it this year. I would like to continue to do better throughout this year, but I don't expect it to get over 50 this year. With the nature of my caveats for buying books is either the next book in a series that I'm currently reading, or I've sat on it for a while and I've just really wanted to get it, or it's gift from friends. My best month was March, where I acquired 2 books from Ren, and both of them had some form of representation. The first is Disability Visibility, and the other is Every Heart a Doorway. So thank you, Ren. I'm aware and wanting to increase it in any way, shape or form. I am not making it an active goal this year. I am just keeping an eye on it, and then for next year I would like to have a numerical goal for my book buying and creating it as diverse as possible, because I do know that I enjoy diverse books more than cis and white. Hopefully we'll be able to get to that point, but I do just want to highlight that that is my error, and I can see the stats. I can see that the stats there, and then hopefully next year I will be able to increase on that representation to be able to get it to a point that I'm happy with, because I feel like it should be reflective of the books that are currently published as well. The final stat that I want to chat about is I have my entire TBR spreadsheet, and there are 2 sections to it. The first is my TBR, which goes up to a certain point, and then Ash's TBR is added onto that. And I do include the books that I'm not interested in ever picking up. There's a couple of ones on there that I don't really have any interest in reading, but they're still there. And the total for the beginning of the year was 429 books. Now, I do know he has had stuff come in that I haven't recorded because they're not ones that I'm interested in picking up, so it's not accurate to his shelves, just because of he has things that come and go for work quite frequently and I don't know what they are. I only care about the books I want to read off his shelves. And for collectively, mine was sitting at 380 and we are currently sitting at 388, with my section being 341 books. So I'm super happy with that. This is accumulation of reading down my shelves, the having to read 2 off before I could put 1 on, and also unhauling and fixing a few errors that I had in my spreadsheet, and that's fine. So I'm really proud of the fact I've got it under 400, which I didn't think was actually a possibility previously because I just kept accruing so many unread things. And the fact that I have got it under and I'm not bringing it back up anytime soon fills me with joy. So I'm going to continue chipping away. I would be pleasantly surprised if I managed to get the whole list down to 350 by the end of the year, which is taking another 38 off. I do think it is remotely possible, but I don't want to set it as a hard goal. I just want to keep chipping away at it and see how we go. If next year I end up wanting to focus on that, then I've made some good headway this year, and I'm really proud of the fact that I have managed to keep it down and just get under that 400. It was really hard when I realized where I was at. I feel like my cap is 400 TBR books. I don't care having over 1,000 books in my collection, but knowing that there were so many things that I hadn't read and I want to be reading things, but I didn't feel like I could because I had so many other stuff that I wanted to read, and my shelves weren't reflective of my reading tastes, and I feel like I'm getting there. I'm really narrowing it down to a place that I feel happy with. So those are my TBR stats, and I'm really chuffed. So if I can continue chipping away at it for this year, I would really love that, and we'll just see where we end up. I hope you have enjoyed this lengthy process and had a cup of tea or a glass of wine or a snack with you throughout this ordeal. And I hope you found that these statistics were interesting. Let me know if there is any other stats that you would like to see, random bits and bobs about different books, like what color's most prevalent or something like that. Feel free to let me know down below in the comments, and let me know, how do you track your reading if you do? Do you have a spreadsheet or do you just use Goodreads? And if you like this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of this mess, feel free to subscribe. I'll hopefully see you in my next video.